Welcome to REM Reward, the podcast that explores the secrets of sleep and psychology. I'm your host, Ryan, and in each episode, we'll dive deep into the world of sleep and other topics such as mental well-being and personal growth. If you want to unlock your full potential and receive the rewards that come with understanding the power of sleep, you're in the right place. To discover more tips and insights on improving your sleep and overall well-being, visit our website and explore our other episodes at remreward.org. Today on REM Reward, I'm joined by Dr. Wanda Willard, professor of psychology at Monroe Community College. I actually had the opportunity to be a student in her class on the mysteries of sleep and dreaming, which played a big role in shaping how I think about sleep today. In this episode, we talk about what happens when we sleep and how sleep affects memory, emotions, and decision-making, and why dreams have fascinated humans across cultures for centuries. We also dive into common myths about sleep, recurring dreams, and whether dreams are meaningful or simply the brain at work. For my first question, what inspired you to teach a class on sleep and dreaming?
There are actually two things that came together at the same time. I was teaching a class in introductory psychology. I'd been teaching that for a few years. And when we got to the unit on sleep and dreaming, that was the unit where so many students had questions. It was the thing that was most interesting to them. And then around that same time, I was having some of my own issues with sleep from a undiagnosed health issue. And I could really feel the effects cognitively, in terms of my daily functioning, my mood states. And then when my health situation got managed after I got diagnosed, it was like I was a whole new woman. And so those two things together, I thought, people really need to understand the importance of sleep. And I knew that I'd have a captive audience because I already knew from my own students how
Right.
interested they were. So I created this class for MCC,
It's
and it's
amazing.
been, yeah. So I think most of the students who take it say how practical it is. So I'm really glad to hear that.
For sure, yeah, it's an amazing story. And first off, I'm glad that your sleep is better now. And that's also actually how I got into sleep is from taking a psychology class,
Hmm.
and that was my favorite unit. So, yeah, I'm not surprised that a lot of students can relate.
Yes,
Uh,
yes.
and then for my next questions, can you just briefly talk about the stages of what happens when we sleep?
Yeah, they're basically four stages. So there's two stages called NREM or non-REM, meaning you do not have rapid eye movement during that sleep. Your eyeballs just kind of randomly roll around in your head. And then there's REM sleep, which is a period of sleep where your eyes start back and forth very quickly as you're sleeping. You can actually see this in babies because their eyelids are really, really thin. So
Mm,
sometimes when they're asleep, you can see their eyeballs moving under their lids. But basically, as we're falling asleep, we go from stage one, which is a light sleep, to stage two, then deep sleep, stage three, and then back up to stage two, then REM sleep, then back down to stage two or three. So we cycle back through those stages about 4 or 5 times in an average 7 to 8 hour sleep period. And those four stages are distinguished by different brainwave patterns. So if
right.
you were in a sleep lab hooked up to electrodes on your brain, we could tell specifically what stage you were in because they're very, very distinctive brainwave patterns and obviously very distinctive things happening when you're in those stages.
Got it. That's super interesting here. I'm also just curious, like, in your opinion, or I guess from the science, is there like a stage of sleep that people think is more important than the other, or is it like it's kind of like a die where it balances
I,
really
w- I
good?
would say there's probably two important stages: stage three, deep sleep, and REM sleep, but for different reasons. Interestingly, infants, they don't have stage one and two. They go
Wow.
from they go from awake, they fall asleep, they go from deep sleep to REM, deep sleep to REM, deep sleep to REM. And so just to simplify it, it's obviously more complex than this, but to simplify it, REM sleep seems to be very, very important for mental activity. So things like memory consolidation, perhaps even problem solving, creativity, things like that. Whereas deep sleep seems to be very, very important for physical restoration. If you've ever been sick, sometimes our first clue that we're getting sick is we get very tired,
Yeah.
and it kind of forces our body to spend more time in sleep. So deep sleep is when the body restores itself, and REM sleep seems to be where the mind restores itself. So I would say if I had to boil it down, those would be two of the more important. And I wouldn't say one was more important than
Right.
the other.
Super interesting. Yeah, thank you for that. And how does like a lack of sleep, or I guess even not good quality sleep, impact our daily lives, including our memory, emotions, and decision making?
Um, how many hours do we have for this interview? Because I could spend days talking about that. But yes, oh my goodness, it's tremendous. The impact is tremendous. So most people, I think, are aware of some of the physical health um, complications, for lack of a better word, that can happen when you have chronic sleep deprivation. I think most people wouldn't be surprised to learn that it affects your immune functioning, but I don't think most people appreciate how much it can affect your mental health. So things like depression and anxiety can be magnified when you're chronically sleep deprived. Obviously, memory, cognitive functioning is definitely impaired, but also things I think most people wouldn't connect to sleep deprivation, like increased risk for diabetes, increased risk for obesity and being overweight. And there's lots of hormonal explanations for that as far as sleep, but also even Alzheimer's disease.
Mm,
They have found that when you get good quality sleep, particularly in late life, which not a lot of older adults do because of changes in melatonin levels and other things happening in the brain, but um, there's sort of a chemical reaction that happens in the brain, or some people describe it like a brain washing, or I like to call it the toilet flush for the brain, that occurs when you're in certain stages of sleep that gets rid of all these excess chemicals built up in
right.
the brain. And so without that, that can contribute to the buildup of these chemicals and plaques and other types of proteins in the brain that can lead to things like Alzheimer's disease and dementia. So it's absolutely essential. Obviously, why would we spend a third of our lives doing it, right? If it wasn't important.
Hmm.
But I think that most people think it's just a thing you do at the end of the day,
Yeah,
but it's absolutely essential to our daily functioning. And I like to say the quality of your sleep at night is directly proportional to the quality of your waking life.
that's a great point. That's a great saying. I completely agree. And
Yeah.
that was really insightful. Thank you for that. And then moving on to things like
Mm-hmm.
dreams, because
Mm-hmm.
you obviously teach the course
Yes.
sleep and dreaming.
Yes.
Do dreams have a meaning, or are they just random mental activity?
Um, I think it depends on who you ask. So, as you know, there are a lot of different dream theories out there,
Hmm.
and some would certainly say dreams have meaning. Dreams, Freud, for example, would say some of the symbolism in our dream can represent our unconscious thoughts. A psychologist named Rosalind Cartwright proposed the problem-solving view. She thought that dreams could help us figure out personal issues in our everyday life. But then there's other theorists, more neurological theorists, who would say, yeah, dreams are just neural activity that we so the brain has this neural activity in our mind, which is different from the brain. Our mind sort of weaves it into a story.
I see.
And so we always want to make meaning out of everything, as people like, imagery in a cloud. Go, it looks like a
Yeah.
rabbit. So we always want to find meaning. And so some experts would say that's what's happening when we're dreaming. There are neural firings coming from our brainstem, and it produces this brain activity. And then our mind wants to take that brain activity and try to figure out, well, what is that? And we weave a story out of it. But I just think dreaming is so complex that there's probably not one theory that can
Hmm.
explain why we dream or why we dream what we do.
Right.
Um, I know in my own life, I would say different dreams I've had have had different purposes and different meanings. Some may have helped me solve personal issues. Others,
Right.
they're so bizarre. I'm like, this has got to be one of those neural random
Right.
firing type things. So,
Yeah, that's super interesting. So I was also just curious, like among people like Freud and people who are like
mhm,
into the really hard sciences, do you think they would
yes.
all agree with the statement of like what's going on in people's lives can impact your dreams, kind of from like the unconscious level, or also kind of like what neurologically is happening?
I would say most most dream theorists would agree with that, but in different ways.
Okay.
Freud would certainly say that dreams are representative of your unconscious. Other theorists would say dreams very much represent what's going on in your everyday life that you're very consciously aware of.
Okay.
And your dream may be helping you resolve a personal issue, um, help you work through a problem at work or in school. And others would say dreams are the process of dreaming is important, but the dream itself is not. So the
Mm,
content of the dream that we want to interpret, some experts would say that's not what's important. It's the process
right.
of it for the brain that's in the mind. That's why we dream, but we like to then interpret what it means. And that's actually why I call the course sleep and dreaming as opposed to sleep and dreams,
I
because
see.
I didn't want to give the impression that we were going to spend a lot of time doing dream interpretation. But yes, the process of dreaming, most theorists would say that's important, but why, that's where they differ.
Got it. Super interesting. And I think you basically answered my next question, but a lot of people associate different symbols like when
Mm-hmm.
you're dreaming, like, oh, I'm flying, I'm falling, I'm being
Yeah.
chased, considered to have standard meanings. I was gonna ask, what do you think about that? And like, I guess what your opinion is on that, yeah.
I think that it depends on what you're dreaming now. The falling dream, the so-called falling dream, that's universal. Most adults have had that at least once, if not many times. And what we seem to understand about that is that it is really a result of, I call it like a sensory illusion. Your and it usually happens when you're really tired and you're falling asleep very, very fast.
Yeah.
So it's sort of a mismatch between brain brain signals, neural firing in your brain, and your muscles suddenly relaxing faster than they may normally do when you're falling asleep. And so this mismatch gives us this false sensation, or as I called it, an illusion of us falling through space, and then we jolt awake. But other cultures may look at that as some other symbol.
Hmm.
But the meaning of that would be as varied as there are cultures and as varied as any historical time period that we looked at.
Right.
And so, even going back to, the 1600s in our culture and the time of the Salem witch trials, you probably didn't want to talk about certain negative imagery in your
Right. Right.
right? So you might find yourself on trial as a witch, and so what we might consider to mean something today may mean something different historically, and what one cultural or religious group believes today may be very different from another one. So I I, I don't really think that there's any one particular meaning to symbols. It really is what you think.
Yeah.
And so dreams, if they have meaning, it's because they're meaningful to you.
It's a great way to put it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I was also just curious, are there like, from what you've seen, I don't know if you'll know this, but like cultures that interpret dreams more than others? Like, for example, like I'm just imagining like one country looks more into it or takes it as a bigger symbol than other countries.
Now that's interesting. I would say that in the past we certainly would have been able to say different, probably different cultures historically. Like let's just take the ancient Greeks, the ancient Romans, the ancient Egyptians. Oh my goodness, the ancient Egyptians were really big into dream interpretation. But even going back as far as 3,000 years ago, the ancient Chinese cultures, Indian cultures in India. So even today, we see remnants of that in India and China. And so
Hmm.
many Asian cultures today have probably put more importance into symbols and dreams
Right.
than other cultures because they have a rich history of this.
Got it. Yeah.
Whereas in the US, we don't, we sort of downplay certain symbols in our dreams. We don't think of it the same way. So I think really if you're looking at cultures that have had a history, of trying to understand dreams. Those cultures today have some semblance of that still there.
Got it. That's super interesting. And for one of my other questions is, you basically answered this, and I just kind of want to get more of your insight on your opinion.
Hmm.
But like, do you think dreams can influence creativity, help solve problems, and or can they offer, I guess, like intuitive insights, or some people even think they can foretell the future? I guess what's your opinion on
Hmm.
that?
Uh, Certainly different theorists would have different things to say, and that Rosalind Cartwright certainly would say they help us solve problems. But my personal opinion, if you're asking my personal opinion, I've actually had experience with a dream here or there,
Hmm.
um, helping me solve a personal problem that at the time I didn't know what that dream represented. It was just driving me
Wow.
crazy that I've dreamed it night after night after night.
Yeah.
And then once I resolved the problem, poof, never had that dream again. And then I have had a few, thankfully only a few, because it can be kind of freaky when it happens. Just a couple of episodes in my life where I'd wake up in a cold sweat of not a nightmare of something happening to a family member, but a knowing. I don't know if that makes sense. Like I just knew it was going
Hmm.
to happen,
Right.
and it did. And so those I can't explain by any scientific
Yeah.
explanation that I teach in my classes, but I personally have had that experience. So I don't want to discount that for anyone else who has, because
Yeah.
I have had that happen. And I
That's
think,
super interesting. Yeah.
yeah, and I think if we were willing to pay more attention to that as a society, as a culture, and cultivate that, it would probably happen more often.
Yeah. I completely agree, and that's super interesting. To me, it really just seems like dreaming is kind of like a black box. It really seems like
Yes.
there's some science that can explain it. There's some science that
Hmm.
really can't. And I guess you may agree with me on this, but that's what really makes it so interesting that it,
Yes,
it can be
absolutely.
studied still, and there's so much to learn about it.
Yeah,
Um,
and I hope that there's certain things in life that science never finds an answer to, because I like to keep kind of that mystery about it. And so yeah, I just think dreaming and what we dream about is so complex. There's probably not one theory that could ever explain the complexity of that.
for sure, yeah. Well, I think those are all the questions I had. Um, I don't know if you have anything to add on, but personally, for me, those are all the questions I had. I just wanted to say thank you for coming on
Oh,
here, taking the
sure.
time to talk, and I'm sure everyone listening is just as grateful as I am. So, thank you again.
You're welcome. And if you have any other questions, feel free. I think this is wonderful. And as I've said to you a number of times, when you were in my class, spread the word, and what you're doing with your website and your podcast are just fantastic. And I'm just so impressed that you're taking on this challenge in educating people about sleep, particularly young people, college students, high school students. They're probably the most sleep deprived,
For sure.
and so I think, to understand the importance of sleep, and what you're doing is making a big step that way. So thank you for doing that, and thank you for inviting me.
Of course, thank you again.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you for tuning into the REM Reward podcast. Before you go, we'd appreciate your support by subscribing, liking, and leaving your thoughts in the comments. Stay tuned for our next podcast, where we will be joined by a special guest speaker to explore even more about the fascinating world of sleep and psychology.